Hello everyone, it's Cheryl Millett here live at 5 Mondays. Not always Monday, just because things changed up when this event occurred. And today, what I was going to be bringing up and bringing to our attention, it's in our awareness. So whatever's in our awareness is energy that we're spending on whatever that is that's in awareness. And this is interesting because yes, whatever you put your awareness, if you're in the past, you're putting your energy and your attention onto things happened in the past. It may keep you there, but it also may throw you into the future as an anxiety and worry as what is coming up. But I thought I would speak to history or high story, as some of them say, and also me as in medications and food. Just simply speak on food and talk about that. So high story is meant to be the story of the victors, or the stories, how people's perspectives are. And this is what's written in books, or this is no different. I'm going to try and take history as in school for our young children and continuing through high school and further. History is one of the subjects, and in history somebody chooses how and what information, what material they want them to learn. School, medical doctors, school, their schooling, anybody's schooling is a choice, somebody's choice to put in writing certain information, and or to go, well, that's the information we want them to focus on. That is the information we want them to learn. And sometimes then it gets filtered into research, it gets filtered into all kinds of avenues thereafter, and how they would practice, and how our children would see the world, and how our children would believe to have the world. So history is very interesting, because when I was watching a video, his name is Young Pharaoh, I think it's a very cute name, but he was bringing up, and I remember my daughter bringing this up, but I don't remember it so much, and this had everything to do with how the slavery got changed in America. Now, quite often we'll think Abraham Lincoln came to the rescue, but apparently he was pressured by what they call Seminoles, or black natives, maybe partially African, and they all got together, and they're the ones who fought the war to change that up and had him do what he needed to do. And then of course certain people didn't want him to do what he wanted to do, and they took him out. But they just, so I kind of remember sometimes how this history, however it is presented to us, may seem like truth because we don't know any better. And they don't really know any better. When reading the Sapiens book, it was clear that, I mean, it was a brief history of mankind, but much of the book still carries on that we were cavemen. Much of the book carries on with Darwin kind of looking at, which has been, how can I say, which has been taken apart. And it was one theory that the scientist or whoever decided to choose, that's what we're going to believe, but without any truth to it, without any fact to it. So to question is very important when it comes to history or high story, because that it is. But what interesting times when we can actually just focus on the present anyway. So really, does much of history matter? Yes, it can matter. And more importantly, today it can matter, because when you see, like the video 60 Minutes from 1976 talking about a so-called pandemic that was, how can I say, loudly shouted that we're in a pandemic, and there was nothing. It was basically nothing. One guy got sick. He was either made or forced or wanted to or needed to, whatever it was, to do one of their army workouts, and he passed out and died. and the other 4 who had it at the camp recovered easily enough, and that's it. And that's what the CDC director actually admitted to. So they made it up. Absolutely. You can't be the CDC director and not think clearly enough and not question clearly enough if there wasn't some sort of hidden agenda behind it. Otherwise, I would just say, oh my gosh, how are we picking our leaders? Because really, to not even question, to not even with that scenario, what they came up with, what they were able to prove. Yeah, so if you haven't already watched the 60-minute 1976 swine flu H1N1 debacle and how a news reporter actually brings forth a lot of information to show just how they're covering it, just how they aren't speaking the truth, and hid information from the people. It's not to say we're going to know exactly why, and isn't really important, but that we have to have a voice and we have to be able to speak about the situation. So just a reminder, great news yesterday, as in somebody uncovered that the CDC in one of their updates actually talked to only 6% of the COVID deaths that they, I guess, put down as with COVID or probable COVID or presumably COVID were actually died from COVID only. 6% of the 153 something thousand. I think it says 182,000. But if they're still measuring it based on probable, presumable, possibly, and then PCR tests that are in a lot of ways inaccurate from the get-go, and this has nothing to do with false positives or, oh yes, doctors telling people that there's possibly more negatives than there's positive. Well, let's just throw all of that in the garbage anyway, because the PCR test was not meant to be for infectious diseases anyway. And then you can throw all that in the garbage because the virus is not what we call an infectious disease anyway. But it will affect people who can't handle detoxing. We know there's such a thing as detoxing side effects, and they can be, if need be, cause a bit of havoc and cause a lot of discomfort. And so there's more to understand about the epidemics and why people are vulnerable and what's going on there than there is to say the virus has any root or any cause in this scenario. And as my book, All Guts, All Glory, just to bring it up, goes into the root causes of disease. That's it. I didn't make it up. Doctors have presented it in the past. I read a chapter about it several years ago, probably more like 10 years ago, and went, wow, why didn't I, a holistic practitioner, even learn that in school? Because that would be a very simplistic way of looking at how all disease comes about and how inflammation is, and I'll say this again, is a component, is a logical component within how the body works within many of diseases. But you have to understand inflammation is both acute and chronic, and there is a difference between the two. So to understand that, I mean, this is why I wrote the book, for the people to understand the root causes of disease. You're going to be able to piece together, have some comfort level, whether you're talking to any practitioners or not. It was written with the practitioner in mind, but it was also written with the good people in mind, because at the end of the day, it is ideal if you know a bit about something so you can talk, you can ask questions. Very important. So history, high story, but history in this case is medical history. This is doctors that I researched 100 years ago to kind of go back where these stages of disease came from, and his earlier textbooks, and how he explains how barbaric, how insane the medical institution came. And we're talking over 100 years ago, well over 100 years ago, and he had to stay on the sidelines. Well, let's just say he had to zip it to do his research for a few decades in order to come to the conclusions that he did. And who knows what you researched, and who knows what, it doesn't go into that detail. But the idea, it makes common sense. So all of the research I would do around diseases has this understanding. So let's go on to medications. Medications are partially, let's stay with the stages of disease, are toxicity. And they're also a controlling mechanism that they've brought in, which is you don't deal with the pain, you actually want to delete the pain. The pain's there to remind you have a broken leg, remind you not to put your weight, not to use this part of the body. So pain does have its purpose, but there's ways obviously to bring down pain. We kind of won't go there, but the idea is medications are used in a not to get at the root cause, just to deal with the symptoms. And the symptoms, inflammation is one of them. The medicines are also adding toxicity, which is another burden to the body, and this is really detailed and described in All Guts, All Glory, how the various toxicities actually play into the stages of disease. And of course, this may be different for different people. The idea that some people are on 7, 8, 9, 10, all of these medications have side effects. And some cases they'll say, well, if this happens, go to the hospital right away. So in some cases, it's serious side effects. And what aren't they telling you? So the good news is that you can easily go on to websites and look up and research what the side effects are. So you want to be on no medications if you possibly can, and less more medications. And there's different ways to look at medications. The idea of cholesterol medication and preventative medication is insane. That's insanity, and I'm sure the good doctors of the past that I researched and studied, above their insanity talk on how medical was working and certain things like that, they would probably totally agree with me that to put people on medications for preventative reasons with a list of side effects and the things that they interfere with, and then on top of that, tell the good people not to take any herbs, not to take any vitamins or any supplements, that kind of stuff. So double whammy. You're not getting any supplements or things that you think are supplements, things that are sold as supplements, even Whole Foods. And so you have this kind of scenario going on. Now I'll tell you a little bit of a story, so it'll give you kind of a bit of an idea of the current system. Although this will go back probably about, I don't know, I'm just going to say 10 years, 12 years, where my father had a heart attack, and I guess he had an episode, and then they called the ambulance, and by the time they got there, he really wasn't showing any signs, and so they weren't going to take him. They weren't going to take him. But then something kind of happened, and he could feel it, and they checked him out. Okay, bring him. And then during the whole scenario about bringing him there and then transferring him to another hospital, he had his heart attacks, and then it was, okay, over to the hospital, see him, going to go do a quadruple bypass, which, by the way, was very interesting. He was supposed to wake up the next day, but he didn't wake up for a week. And why do I tell you he didn't wake up for a week? Because he was detoxing. The body really needed to adjust, and he was some beer, not necessarily every day, but he smoked, and for however 60 years, 70 years. So the idea is you had somebody was there. And it took about a year. No, not a year, a week. And then what I learned was that because he was in his sleep, or let's say in his healing mode, or in his sleep mode, he was agitated. Now, whether he was agitated or not, I never saw it. But they strap them down and they give them psych drugs. And the nurses there can do that. So that was crazy. I mean, I really didn't find that out. But here's the kicker, people. When he came home from the hospital, I whipped up. He's about an hour north of here, close to Barrie. And I looked at swear to God, either 3.5 pages, 3 pages, 3.5 pages of medication. And there might have been about 6 to a sheet, something like that. Some of it is more for a number of weeks. It just came out. But there was 2 medications on that list that I couldn't make out and that did not have the purpose, and they did have the amount to take, and they did not have when to stop it. There was no indication to take ongoingly, or the next time you see your doctor, or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or till you finish the bottle, nothing. So I went with my stepmother to the pharmacy, talked to the pharmacist and says, what are these 2? And they were psych drugs. And I said, why would they be giving him psych drugs? He just had a heart attack. Oh, he must have been agitated in the hospital. And I go, all right, don't fill them. Don't fill them. And so his whole stupor and his whole, the way he was for a while was because this is what they were giving him. Even though he woke up, even though he was in the hospital for a number of days thereafter, they were still giving them to him. So sometimes we wonder, and I saw this, another story with my grandfather. We brought him into a long-term facility, but I suspect he was on psych drugs probably before we picked him up, and that's why his stupor once again. And when we brought him here to the old age home, so because my mother moved back here, I remember walking in. First of all, we had to actually have a code to get into the hospital. We had to have a code because in case people wandered out in their stupor, not funny, they could get out, probably because they want out. But going through the hallways and where my grandfather was like walking through a zombie, very medicinal, very hospital-like, not warm, not fuzzy, nothing. They're all sitting out there drooling. You say hello. I was saying hello to no response whatsoever. They were out of it, sitting in wheelchairs, lining up the alleys, lining up the walkway. So when my grandfather, actually, he was walking with a walker. I guess I would say he was 99 at the time, and he was helping somebody else fell, and he went to help them, and then he fell and supposedly broke his hip. And I said, okay, well, when are you going to take him to so that he can get back up and walking with his walker? And they said, no, that's not what we do. He'll never walk again. He will stay in his wheelchair now because we fear for him falling and breaking his hip again. So even though he was strong and walked for hours up until his 80s, until his 90s, this wasn't a consideration. This wasn't, their spirit, was not a consideration whatsoever. So it was interesting just kind of exploring that. But when my father was in the hospital and I said, what medications he's on, they didn't tell me about the psych drug, but they did tell me that he's got to be on this. And I said, well, take him off the cholesterol. He's never had any cholesterol issue. Look at his chart. No, we can't do that. If we take him off any one of these 5 meds, then we have to say, you just take him out of the hospital and you look after him. Anyway, kind of interesting stuff, obviously more stories. So medications, we have to be careful what they're giving our good, our elders or any one of us, and ask questions, and what are they for, and what are the side effects, and how long do you need to take them, and why? Because there's so many people that have come off of their medications because they don't work, the side effects are apparent, they've read the side effects, and know they feel better without it. And I have to tell you, because this is another story where another person whose father was on a number of meds, shaky, had bladder issues. Of course, the body's trying to detox all of these chemicals through the liver. It's got to go out. The body, one of a couple ways, one through the kidneys, another through the bowel, the skin, breathing. But the kidneys is a good one. The kidneys, the liver are 2 major organs that will be affected. So interestingly enough, when we're kind of looking at all of this stuff, we have to really, really ask questions. Now, there was the story that I was going to tell, and it left my mind. Let's see if it'll come back. We'll see if it comes back to do with the medications. Yes. I did have one client that was on 19 medications. She didn't really care what they're for. She just went on them because the doctor told her to go on them. Ah, here's the story. Just popped in. So here's an elderly gentleman, absolutely not himself. Has to wear, diaper, because the urgency to be sort of getting to the kidney. And the son, who was probably in 60 himself, or early 60s, said to the specialist, "Are any of these meds keeping my father alive?" And the specialist said, "No." No, they're not. And quite frankly, the medications are done on healthy people, 50s, younger healthy people, 40s, 50s, that kind of thing. So isn't that interesting? Medication. So we really have to focus on that. I don't know how many people have spoken up about it and have changed them and then have let them go. And I mean, you have the medical doctors, yes, they've been trained for your best interest and trained to give medicine. That's a bulk of the curriculum, probably, aside from knowing how they want them to know how the body works. But yeah, so that's that. Food. Now, when it comes to food, I usually have this 5-finger philosophy that I teach at the presentations, and it's in detail in my book. But the foods that we consume today, if we had to step into looking at the difference between the history of food and the present moment of food, and because I was in food processing, I can speak from experience, the foods that we have today on the shelf are highly processed. And highly processed could mean from vegetable oils, and you tell me if this sounds edible or not. High heat, so we call it RBD. So refined, meaning heat, bleached, and deodorized, right? So if you take vegetable oils and you produce them, they won't last very long. They have a high oxidation rate, so they are not going to be good on the shelf for very long. I think I looked up, when I was doing my research for the book and looking at fats and walnut oil, there's this expiry date on many of these nut oils that are coming about, and I'm almost sure it was walnut oil because that makes a lot of sense. They would say several months as far as the bottle goes, but if it's open, it's really only 1 month. And maybe it's different depending on temperature, light, and things like that, with how you're storing it. But the idea is much of the food that we have on the shelf is processed. And in some ways, genetically modified organisms, not just the natural selection. Hey, I've got 10 strawberries in front of me. I like this big strawberry. I'm going to use the seeds from the big strawberry and make more big strawberries. Big strawberries. Not that, not the natural selection part. But with that GMO, you are entering into changing the energy or the vibration of the food. That's what you're doing. So when we see the foods in the, when they say produce, let's stick with produce here, the chemicals that they use in the sprays, the pesticides, let's just stick with pesticides, they're on there, but also waxes on apples, waxes on cucumbers. Like, there's things that they put on. Why? Rightfully so, because they have to transport, or they have to sit for whatever time, or in a deoxygenated room, and they want them to, but they don't want to lose money, and they don't want to, how can I say, throw money out of the window when they have all these beautiful apples. But there, so you have to understand that as much as the whole grocery store exists, and they say shop around the perimeter, we have a variation between processed to more processed to very processed. And even the meats and dairies go in a spectrum of being organic or grass-fed, okay, organic corn, this is the beef, to just eating whatever GMO corn or grains, their unnatural diet. So where the animals come from and how they're taken care of, and what they're fed, and any medications, once again, that they may be given. So you gotta think about the pesticides almost as a medication for the fruits and vegetables that we would see. The farmed fish, they don't eat on their natural diet. I mean, I worked for a company, food processing, they had a fisheries department, and they could have easily put in red dye in for the salmon to make it that color. They were at the time switching to using pink grapefruit, so there's or red grapefruit, where that particular dye, I don't know how they extracted or whatever, but that was what they wanted to buy, so they could put it in to make the salmon look better. But that would be a natural ingredient, of course. But like anything, I'm not sure what they do with that before the animal, the fish gets it. But the idea is there are very little foods in the store that haven't had some sort of processing. If it's stored in storage, then that's a bit of processing. It's stored there for months and months and months, and they're picked not ripe, right? So that's part of the process, not processed, but part of the process that isn't making it what it needs to be, or vine ripen like the tomatoes are. Are they outside? Are they getting the natural light? And when things are picked, the energies of or vibrations of the foods start to deteriorate. And you know that to be true because if you pick something out of your garden, let's say even lettuce, it wilts very quickly. And if you pick raspberries or strawberries, they go moldy very quickly. So the vibration of the food, if they aren't artificially or somehow made to last longer, this is why berries are a very big problem. They're not on the clean diet for that reason, because the molds you can't see, yes, there's the molds you can smell but still not see, and then there's the molds you can see. But you can sometimes taste it and not smell it and not see it, but you can taste it, yes. And so that, the clean diet is about taking the processing of certain foods and identifying that they can be a problem. And things like that are meant to break down food. They're not meant to be eaten, like molds. They're nature, but they're not meant to be. So when we think about our foods and our vegetables and our fruits and stuff, they are naturally supposed to deteriorate and naturally supposed to break down and become one with the earth, if we want to say that, or more seeds to grow more plants, or whatever we can think of, right? So foods are very interesting in a sense that we just have to understand the bigger picture. Now, I know the one key question I used to get at presentations, which I'm not going to go into because I go into the different food groups, is really about, well, what are we supposed to eat? So I can talk about what you're not supposed to eat, but what are we supposed to eat? And just kind of briefly with the five-finger philosophy is that raw foods, now not everybody can chew raw foods because they have issues, periodontal disease, and the teeth are loose, but you can make them into whole food smoothies. So raw foods for the enzymes, for the good bacteria, all of those things. And of course, out of the garden, picked out of the garden, brushed off and eaten, amazing. Fresh foods, so this is where I was talking about part of the processing for the good fruits and vegetables that may be in our, that's why I was so adamant, people were so adamant about, let's have Ontario produce, we don't want things being stored and carried in trucks for long distances. So there's that, fresh, to pick fresh. So if you're in foraging and you're eating right away, wow, that's what I love about it. Then whole foods, because we're not quite sure what is in the entire, we're not quite sure, science is not quite sure what makes up, there may be certain nutrients they haven't discovered yet, and how do they work together. So whole foods, like an example would be, I always like to talk about apples. There's the whole apple, so you get the skin, what's under the skin, you would get yeah, I mean, you just get it all, the fiber, everything. So if you take that and you make it into applesauce, and you've got a white apple and you make applesauce, the applesauce does not look as white as the apple when you first bit into it. It's some oxidation. And now they have unsweetened applesauce, which is really good, but they also have citric acid and certain things sometimes to keep fruits, vegetables from going brown, more brown. The applesauce, if you want to, another product of apples is apple juice, and you can see how brown that is, right? Apple juice is very brown, even though they'll put citric acid in and they'll put different things and you can taste it, you're still going to get that, and you won't get any fiber, zero fiber. So the idea with understanding our foods and the different processes they go from one to the other is to try to get as whole food as possible. And I'm going to make a few videos because I just really want to have fun with this about gluten-free, easy to make desserts. And I laugh because just how simple it is. Anyway, what's kind of the fifth? So we have fresh, which is in some ways local. We have raw, we have whole, and am I going to remember the fourth one? I know the fifth one is supplements from the same. That I do know. So what's the other one? What's the other one? Anyway, it'll come up to me. It'll come to me. So foods can be chosen for many different reasons. Obviously, if you have a garden or if you forage, you get food in the wild, they have a better immune system. It's just some of it's more common sense, basically how we treat our plants and our food and with the modifications and different things like that. And you get such a variety. So what did I eat today? What did I forage today? Just because I did. I foraged wild grapes. That's what it is. So there's a particular vine. There was a lot more of it. They cut down a tree, so there's not as much. But it was great to see that there were a handful of bunches on there. But they don't grow like bunches like the grapes we're used to seeing in the store. Oh, no. It's almost like they have room to breathe. And at times there is seeds in there. Now it seems like a big seed, but when I was chewing the fruit, a little bit more sour, not as sweet as some people recognize. Some of the fruit out there has been grown and somehow, I don't know if it was modified or chosen sweet, 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 sweet. But if you get the fruits in the wild, even apples, they're not that sweet. And the grape, the wild grape, not that sweet, but delicious nonetheless. And half of it is seed. So I think on average there's 3 to 4 seeds to any one of those little wild grapes. Well, they're not too tiny, but they are smaller than the ones that, and nowhere near as cramped. If you've seen some of the wine grapes, if you've seen them on the vine or even the other grapes, yeah, they're not as big, not as sweet, and not as many all bunched together. So that's kind of what I wanted to speak today about, because it's never too late. You know, never too late to change it up a bit, to explore. So may I suggest you think of food and dietary as exploring. What I think about as far as food, and I know some people want to lose weight. They think losing weight's the best thing, and it's probably a healthy thing, depending on how much weight. But the idea is, I usually rather have people learn to eat a certain way properly first before I would put them on any detox. Because what are you going to do after you, in some cases people call it diet, or detox, or any cleansing, whatever you want to call it, and it's what the thereafter is. So there's has to be some exploring and trying and working things out to have a decent diet, a decent food regimen as well, and a healthy lifestyle, in order to then move into being ready to cleanse, whether it's cleaning out the bowels with the internal saltwater bath, liver, gallbladder flush, or herbal teas for cleansing, herbals, because there's a lot of herbals when it comes to cleansing, or it could be very simple as using your foods. But the idea is it would be much more, it would be better if a person would get to a, I'll call it cleaner diet, because that's what I put my clients on, so I'll call it cleaner diet. Once on then and kind of has the regimen and routine and understands and has the education and things are in place, then it's much better, because then you have something solid to go back to, something solid to go to. Now, that clean diet or how you would eat on a regular basis could absolutely morph over time, just based on more exploring, more, just adjustments, and maybe now you like different things, and maybe you learned about different things, found recipes, whatever it is. It can morph over the years. But I will say, when it comes to a gentle cleanse, when it comes to certain things, it can make a huge and immediate difference for people. But some people are so toxic they have to do a modification of certain things, which can be of value to have a practitioner on knowing what you're doing and understanding that. But some people are very, very keen to do it, and they're okay with certain possible side effects, which they go through it, big troopers, and come out rosy on the other end. So there's good, but it's good to see that. So I don't know who's on today. It would always be nice to see who's on and who's listening, but maybe due to privacy they don't want you. But welcome, and that's really all I wanted to come on today. There's always tons of subjects, and definitely still doing more research, but I've got to kick into doing the courses, finishing the videos and doing that to get them uploaded into the Academy. Most of them are going to be live, but it's just the process of wrapping things up and putting everything into the site. So for the next couple of weeks, it'll be fun to do that and get that organized. But I do want to remind people, if you're not familiar or if you've heard it, that this fall, starting Saturday, September the 12th, I'll be teaching YDAN, which is 19 moves, first thing in the morning. This one you would normally do them, but it can be added on to any routine. The nice thing about it is they're really easy. You can do them anywhere. You don't need any equipment, about 20 minutes, and it's like a full body, get up and go, help with the liver, help with the circulation, help with, and then of course, the breathing. Strengthen, it's good for strengthening muscles, flexibility. It's kind of moving. They call it external elixir. But it's really, really, now that this event happened, hi sis, now that this event happened, I was inspired, I'll say it that way, sounds better, inspired to teach YDAN through Zoom, and it worked out amazingly. And so why I kind of bring it up is because any of you good people could be anywhere in the world, and because there's a recording too, it's very helpful to watch it at a different time. But there is a practice, and preferably a daily practice, so that you are learning the few moves and then you add some more. So by the end of time, 6 weeks, you have been regularly practicing them. But it's the benefits that really make a difference. And if people are in a space where they can't do anything else, these you can do, because you're going to modify as to what you can do, and then it just keeps you just keep feeling better, knowing your own strength and knowing your own body to be able to do it. So YDAN, I'm going to put the link down below. I've got people signing up already. I went back to doing an in-class, just wanted to see where people were at, but I can only do a maximum of 3 people. So we have that, people signing up for that. But of course the online one is a good one, but I still want to have only a max of 15, maybe 20 at max, so that if there's any questions, they're easy to kind of go through. You can spend a bit of time at the end to go through them. But the good news is, whether people come here in person or they do it online, is there are recorded. So there's the recorded speaking part, and then there's the recorded, along with that, the recorded showing the moves, and then they have the practice video, which is just straight up the moves, which makes it really easy. But if they miss a class and it's easy to watch the instruction video, then they can use the practice video. So a lot of fun. The reason why I learned is because I wanted to see how, yes, I would like it and then be able to share it with other people. So here we are. So Wyden, I'll put a link down below. You can learn some more because there's more benefits and other things that are on the web page, and we'll go from there. So there you go. History or high story and medications, you taking medications and food. So those three things, what I wanted to come and focus on today, because we just got to get present into the time and use the high story or any history to how can I say, to be more present than ever and as to what's going on. So that's a really good thing. So I'll continue to talk to various things and even to do with the event, but I think at any rate the event is the event, and we need to hunker down and focus on the things that actually will remain and continue to remain for the years to come, the days, the years, the decades to come. And how I looked at it and how I wrote about it was more the pieces of the puzzle. So this event is only a part of the puzzle when we think of our life, our living our life. So that's why just a piece. Everything else still exists, from how you take care of your body to, yes, the mental, the mind, all of these things still exist outside of the event. So that's where we're going to keep that for now. Focus in all the different pieces, not just the event. But yeah, sure is a lot of things one could watch, and I haven't really continued to explore the math. However, just seeing where the information is, reading it for myself, and doing that little math, yes, I'm not sure if there's even anything beyond that other than more questions. So take care, everyone. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for listening. And if you came on a little bit later, then you can watch this video at your leisure, and we'll go from there. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your evening and week, and we'll see you live at 5 at some point. Bye for now.